both teams for your well-structured arguments. We now proceed to the question and answer session with our adjudicators. Judges, may I kindly ask you to keep each question under 15 seconds. Debaters will have up to 2 minutes to respond. We will ensure that both teams receive equal opportunity to answer.
Thank you to all the debaters. I would like to ask a question for both teams. Should ASEAN ban commercial surrogacy but permit altruistic surrogacy?
Hello? Am I audible? Thank you. Okay, so thank you panelists for the question. Responding to the question to whether ASEAN should ban commercial or altruistic surrogacy, the response to that would be yes, so the primary argument in this debate here today is to ban commercial surrogacy on the basis that women are not being coerced, or women are making this choice not because it's of their own free will, but rather because they are being coerced to do so because of the economic desperation and economic benefits that commercial surrogacy has, right? So this debate is primarily based on that, based on the reason that 85% of surrogacies are commercial, whereas only a small minority of surrogacy are altruistic. So yeah, that's why the debate's mostly on commercial. But note that the ban is also not just something that we came up with, whereas if you look at EU, right, they also do a blanket ban on commercial surrogacies, whereas altruistic surrogacies are indeed legal in our side of the world. So yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Judge, for the question. Whether or not ASEAN should ban altruistic or commercial surrogacy. In our viewpoint, both are not banned as well. Why? Because altruistic surrogacy is given willingly by the surrogate mother, and the mother itself will comply and also understand that the risk that will accepted throughout the pregnancy. And altruistic itself also most of the time is exists within the family and tie related bonds, which is it will be violating the rights of the surrogate mothers, because if we ban the autonomy of her own decision, it will obviously and undeniably defy the existence of human rights itself. And for the commercial surrogacy, it is also, we do not choose to ban, but we have to regulate it. Why? Because the first commercial itself often exists with economical benefits. However, we also believe that every human right has the decision and ensurement that they have a stable job and to provide health and well-being for their life. Thank you.
Right. Let me congratulate the debaters. It was really good to see you debate with passion. Can I invite you to share with us how do your various arguments uphold human dignity? Right. So, how do your arguments, uphold, the importance of human dignity. Thank you.
Hi, honorable panel. I think I will start in 3, 2, 1. Under the idea of human dignity, I think that opposition better serves or uplifts human dignity under a few folds. I think, number one, inherently we have to precisely understand that individuals or surrogate mothers in the first place who choose to be surrogate mothers oftentimes have no other alternative. They turn to be surrogate because they have the ability to do so. I then think that it is in the responsibility of the state to then allow them to fulfill their destiny or fulfill the choice in which they made at the first place. I think under the idea of fulfilling human dignity, the state, under our side of the house, in which side opposition, we better allow human dignity because number one, under regulations, right, you have legal contracts in which you ensure that individuals or stateless babies, for example, do not exist anymore. Under our side of the house, you understand who the parents are of the surrogate baby in the first place. But then secondly, you also receive things such as like free consent under our side of the house, in which individuals are able to consent to being a surrogate mother in the first place. Then lastly, I think more like beneficial under our side of the house is that you're also safeguarded by legal and medical protection under our side of the house. So as to say, if you choose to be a surrogate mother, I think under our side of the house, we get that job done, but then we also provide you with the abilities to become a surrogate mother in the first place. And I think that is precisely as to why we also uphold human dignity to the largest form when it comes to surrogacy as well. Thank you.
So thank you for your questions. So in terms of the dignities of people, the Thai government here is not trying to distort opposition arguments. Of course, we both have somewhat a very strong point. However, in our side of the house here, we tackle a lot of stakeholders. For in this case, we would focus mostly on the children itself, which is the baby that is born. So in terms of human dignity, we do understand that some couples or some people may not have the freedom or so-called somewhat privilege to have the babies of their own, and that is why they go and seek for the for a surrogacy services. However, our side of the house already exemplified the fact that this surrogacy, so-called commercial surrogacies, has had a lot of consequences that leave many people a lot of effects that could not be done by even a regulations. So here we wanted a complete ban on surrogacies because we believe that it did more harm than good. Their side of the house, of course, raised the fact that about the LGBTQ people, about the infertile couples. But our side of the house here, we prioritize every human beings, and we believe that that is what human right is all about, right? Everyone has the exact same right. They can do whatever they want, and just because that they have some money and some people really in desperate need of that financial compensations, that those privileged people should not have the privilege to just do whatever they want to because they want a baby. And that is why here we are advocating for a complete ban of the surrogacy itself, because as see right now, as well as in the current status quo, even with some sort of regulations, there are still a lot of market as well as some sort of transactions that baby are being bought and being sold after, and there was no any actions thought about it. So our side of the house still would want the complete ban on surrogacy, and instead we want to encourage and motivate other parents to go through the adoption instead, or to go through the very advanced technologies like the ART or the IEF. Thank you.
I'm Vanak from the Ministry of Justice, so I'm really interested in the debate, especially on the legal aspect, the regulation of the surrogacy. Yeah. So I would like to pose a question to the opposition who seem to take stance on the regulation on the surrogacy. So given the different level of economic growth, cultural, political situation among the ASEAN member states. My question is, if you want to regulate surrogacy, I want to hear your view, how far you want to go. Should each member state have their own rule and regulation, or it should have common rule and regulation for all ASEAN member states on surrogacy? And what are the mechanisms to promulgate or to develop and implement such surrogacy law for the whole ASEAN member states? I hope you get my question. Thank you.
Greetings, honorable panel. I'd like to thank you for that question first and foremost. And to answer your question on what does the regulation actually look like under our side of the house, I think that first and foremost, I want to just clear up that I think cultural or religious values necessarily differs across ASEAN in the first place. But I think as a collective and as a consensus, we can still set a minimum regional standard, such as like things as a bare minimum for medical safety and rights protection in the first place. And I think this is necessarily something that is not like impossible or like not necessarily impossible to implement, because we've seen it done within like the US before, in which we talk about things such as like receiving monetary compensation for surrogate mothers in the first place. You allow them to have ethical consent, like in which they are able to freely consent to being surrogate mother. But then also you allowing them to be safeguarded by legal and medical protection as well, in which I think that under our side of the house, we also provide that as like pretty much the bare minimum too. I think that necessarily when you talk about ASEAN collaborating as a consensus, we already do so under very sensitive topics, things such as like child trafficking, human trafficking in general. But I think that surrogacy is necessarily not on that caliber, but necessarily under the same like scope or topic. Therefore, to answer your question, I'd say that cultural or religious values differ from one state to another. However, we can still set a bare minimum in which each and every member state can apply towards their respective states.
To make it clear for the government side, you can answer the questions if you want to answer it.
The same question as this,
Yes.
but his question were toward the regulation. And we're trying to get the question.
It is a question about regulation.
But he asked like to what extent do we regulate, but we propose for a complete ban. So I think it's a different direction. So with regard to the convincingness as well as the persuasions of all 11 or 10 ASEAN countries as a whole to agree to the complete ban proposed by Thai government, we would suggest the really importance of human rights as a whole. And if we take a look at the UDHR, all 10 or 11 ASEAN countries did already ratify it. So it may not be that hard to convincing in legal. However, in principle. However, in such realities, we would also like to emphasize the fact that these ban on the surrogacy itself is not new, and it is not something that just comes up out of nowhere. The EU as well as the European Union as well as the African Union, although they did not do a very complete ban, some countries in the specific union had already had a ban on the surrogacy itself. So this is why we want ASEAN to be more progressive and lead towards to the betterment of the human rights as a whole by banning surrogacies. And the fact that it has posed a lot of more harms than good here, I don't think that Thai government has to do a lot of convincingness to all ASEAN countries to just do a complete ban. And of course, we do acknowledge that culturally, politically, and economically, every country is different. Some might be developed, some are still developing. It might be hard, but here we want to emphasize the importance of human rights because we're here to advocate for human rights, and this sort of thing should not come before human rights itself, and human rights still should be placed in the first priorities, and that will be the answer. Thank you.
Thank you to the judges and debaters for your questions and answers. We now open the floor to our audience for questions and comments. Please keep each question short, no longer than 15 seconds, and debater, you may respond with 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Fia from Indonesia. So my question lies on the sense of consent, because Gulf champions that there have the concern of common litigation, and all says that there's going to be regulation enforced within consent. So I want to ask, if consent exists on both sides, can you argue, does consent in your side, is it effective or not? Is the consent that exists on your side natural or not? Or is it consent that is forced by external factors? Is there any external factor that argues with your consent? Thank you.
Hi, I couldn't catch your name, but thank you for your question. To answer your question on whether or not, on whether consent, which side betters for in terms of like consent, I'd say that on opposition side, when you regulate surrogacy, it's way better in comparison to opposition, which you ban consent, specifically because we told you that the tipping point is like, regulation, sure, proposition or government says regulation necessarily is bad, but they don't prove why banning it is better in the first place. But then secondly, I tell you that ethical surrogacy is necessarily better here because especially in terms of when you're talking about vulnerable stakeholders such as stateless babies, which exist more under their side of the house because of a few things. And like we tell you that it's not a prominent problem. And this is done because number one, when you have consent under regulation under our side of the house, there's legal parentage. When surrogacy is now regulated, the law can actually define who the legal parents actually are. This then, therefore, sets up as a prerequisite to things such as secured citizenship, which actually helps these babies in the first place, like throughout their entire lives. Under their side of the house, without consent, individuals are more likely to get exploited because the state isn't like providing them with an option to have like medical care or overlook upon like surrogacy in the first place. That is to say that I think that under our side of the house, when you have legal parentage, when you have secured citizenship, like inevitably you like the consent that is provided by the surrogate mothers in the first place automatically plays a large role in terms of like identifying who the parents are, but also in fact like getting the legal compensation in which they like are like they necessarily want in the first place. And that's necessarily why I tell you that consent is better on our side.
My appreciation to the audience for the question as an engagement. The government side, you may answer the question from the audience.
Yeah, so to clarify your question on whether consent is natural or not in our side of the world, the issue in the status quo is this. It's as simple as the idea that women in the status quo are not going into surrogacy because of their own choice. Rather, they do it out of economic desperation. Our side of the world is able to solve this issue. Why? Because by banning commercial surrogacy, we eliminate this from happening in the first place. By banning commercial surrogacy, then we're able to tackle this problem where women are being manipulated and coerced into doing this unethical thing. We're actually able to uphold various UDHR articles that we're trying our very best to uphold, and therefore, by banning it, we would actually be able to solve the problem. Whereas if you look at the problem from side opposition, the issue still exists. Majority of people who go into surrogacy do so out of desperation. Therefore, the case on their side of the world is that more women suffer, more women go through these issues, and by not banning it in the first place, you're actually promoting it from happening. Therefore, more problems exist in the status quo on their side of the world. Thank you.
Thank you for the engagement from the audience and from the both sides. For the debate on these important issues, may I now invite the proposition and opposition team to the center of stage for a handshake as a gesture of mutual respect.